What's up, everyone? Welcome to TYT. Anna Kasparian and Jayar Jackson with you. Jayar, senior producer of TYT, regular co-host on the Damage Report with John Idarola. What's up?
Regular yeller, apparently. I've been stuck on that since Wednesday. I screamed on the Damage Report, and I didn't enjoy how that came across. But I mean,
why?
I don't mind what was said. I just don't like the delivery.
I think
maybe I can yell today and just even it all out.
Sure. I mean, I'm actually calm today compared to the rest of the week. So have at it. It'll be a nice balance to me.
It's gonna be a yell boy that's gonna be here today.
Well, Jank's been a lot more calm lately. I mean, his days of like getting enraged, I think, have subsided a little bit. But anyway, but I hear you. Sometimes like the stories and especially the stuff that we've been dealing with, the subject matter we've been dealing with a lot lately, it's tough to handle. So I've been feeling the same way. I totally get what you're saying. So a few announcements, a few housekeeping notes before we move on to the news today. First, I want to encourage you guys to like and share this stream. It's one of the best ways to help TYT. And we've been playing this fun game where if we get more than 1,000 likes and shares on the stream, we'll have like some sort of reward at the end of the show. And Charlie's been making an appearance. That's my lovely little pet, and also someone I treat as if he's my own child. But I want to switch it up today. So even though the lower third says dog, I'm gonna go ahead and say that I'm gonna bring 90s dance music back into the mix. Okay, I know that you had an appreciation for La Bouche, JR. I'm not saying I'm gonna pressure you to sing, but if you wanna sing along with me, it can be a La Bouche song, all right? So we'll see what happens. We'll see if we get enough likes.
Can we go with Le Click, maybe La Bouche? What was the third one? There was like 3 Les in the 90s of that house tech music stuff. Maybe there was only 2, but I thought there was a third big one. I'm sure there was tons more, but.
I love Debbie Deb. Debbie Deb was the bomb, but like I have stories to share about Debbie Deb. When I hear music, okay, no, you guys didn't earn it yet. You didn't earn it yet, okay, not yet. All right, other notes. We have teamed up with Aspiration, and we're looking to give away an e-scooter. And for your chance to win, all you need to do is go to tyt.com/greensummer. Again, that's tyt.com/greensummer. The e-scooter costs around $2,000, so why not try to see if you can get that for free? All the details are on that website. Also, programming note, Common Room will happen tonight, brand new episode. And the guest on Common Room will be Brett Ehrlich, Jayar Jackson, John Idarola, and streamer Kitty Cosmos. Lots of fun. Check that out at 9 p.m. Eastern time, 6 p.m. Pacific on twitch.tv/TYT, twitch.tv/TYT. Without further ado, let's move on to the news.
We refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
That was Martin Luther King Jr.'s legendary I Have a Dream speech 57 years ago during the March on Washington. And it's been 57 years to the day that march happened. And we're commemorating that with yet another March on Washington, honestly, bringing up the same issues that were brought up in the 1960s. And so we're gonna show you guys some of the incredible speeches that took place today. But before we do it, we're also going to go back in time, take a look at history, and take a look at how much things have changed or haven't changed. But first, let me give you a little bit of context about what's happening today. So participants gathered at the Lincoln Memorial for the event. It was organized by Reverend Al Sharpton and joined by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s son, Martin Luther King Jr. III. There were speeches from family members who have lost their loved ones as a result of police brutality, excessive force, and absolute evil and cruelty. And so their words were incredibly powerful, and it's important to share them with you. The event, dubbed the Commitment March, get your knee off our necks, brings an end to a tumultuous week, one that saw Jacob Blake shot by police in Wisconsin. It follows a summer that has been a global outcry over the killings of Black Americans at the hands of law enforcement, and it takes place in the midst of a pandemic that disproportionately affected people of color. With that said, I do want to go back in time to John Lewis's speech in 1963, where he specifically talks about how tired he is of being beaten and treated differently from white people in America. Take a look.
Those who have said be patient and wait, we must say that we cannot be patient. We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now. We are tired. We are tired of being beaten by policemen. We're tired of seeing our people locked up in jail over and over again. And then you holler, be patient. How long can we be patient? We want our freedom and we want it now. I appeal to all of you to get in this great revolution that is sweeping this nation. Get in and stay in the streets of every city, every village and hamlet of this nation until true freedom comes, until the revolution of 1776 is complete. We must get in this revolution and complete the revolution.
So those were strong words, an important speech, and we heard many of the same statements made today, 57 years later. Jayar, I wanted you to jump in and just share your thoughts before we go to some of those speeches.
Yeah, I was curious as to how many people knew John Lewis spoke on the same day or at that same event at the March on Washington. And the reason that they even did it is, everyone likes to cite Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, one particular line of it, and then ignore almost everything else. Ignore what led up to it. Ignore what they said before and after that line. Ignore what other people that were at that event said. And ignore the fact that when they were doing it, the reason they were doing it is because our government wasn't listening to them. And that previous to all that, the protests and the boycotts and the arrests and the peaceful protests that were dubbed as violence because of the nature of the people that were there, all that stuff was happening because those other factors are ignored because a rational human being would look up and say, wow, sounds like right now. And so when you have people marching all across the country, because what else John Lewis was saying during that speech was, this isn't just happening in right here in the South. It's not just happening in Birmingham. It's not just happening in this city that you're hearing about. This is happening in like 3 or 4 other cities where they have to march and do this constantly over and over and over again. And not that we're enjoying getting arrested and sprayed by fire hoses, bit by dogs and put in prison. We're doing this because we need to get your attention. Now, when John Lewis was still around just this summer, and people ignored the fact that he's a civil rights icon, people talked all this trash about him. People sent him more racist things in recent years. We don't realize that we'll deify Martin Luther King from all circles, and Republicans will act like they love him. But if he was still around, they'd hate him just the same. He was the person that they didn't like then, and now then once he's gone, you can rewrite that history and have it form to your agenda. But John Lewis was still here, and I think if he was here today, he'd have been at the same event, and guess who would have brushed him aside yet again? But now we can start deifying him. We can start saying that everything he stood for in the civil rights era was something that we've achieved. No, we haven't. No, we haven't. Because if you listen to what he said, because we never do that, you'll hear that he's saying the same thing that protesters are saying right now that we're calling thugs, rioters, and looters. Just saying. But in order to formulate your opinion or formulate your words to create a new reality, you have to ignore what the previous people actually said.
Yeah, and one of the messages from the civil rights era that I think always gets kind of drowned out in discussions is the emphasis on economic opportunity, right? So you're right in that whenever we hear about Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, we hear that one line, but that speech touched on so many societal issues that negatively impacted the Black community in America at that time, and many of those same issues still stand today. And so it's listening to the speeches today I don't want to be so pessimistic. Like, I want to have hope. And the reason why I chose that snippet of MLK's speech for the cold open of this story is because what amazed me about him was his optimism, right? He was fighting because he genuinely believed that we could accomplish and achieve a better country. And 57 years later, it's hard to see the endless video footage of Black people getting shot in the back, Black people getting choked to death in the middle of the street, seeing case after case of no justice, people who don't get charged after they lie to the judge in order to obtain a no-knock warrant and then use a battering ram to enter someone's home in the middle of the night and then shoot and kill an innocent person as she's in her bedroom, Breonna Taylor. Like, these stories they just crush the soul. They really do. And I want to go to some of these speeches that happened today, including Jacob Blake's sister, who also spoke during the March on Washington today. Let's take a quick look at that and we'll discuss.
America, your reality is not real. Catering to your delusions is no longer an option. We will not pretend. We will not be your docile slave. We will not be a footstool to oppression. Most of all, we will not dress up this genocide and boo and call it police brutality.
Even more so, man. Okay, so for people who maybe watched it or didn't, or outlets or politicians who paid attention or didn't pay attention today, they didn't listen to her either. She's just the sister of a guy who was shot multiple times and now has caused this much anger that they're also against now too. So you have to find out where you fall in. So as we start preaching how far we've come, start giving me some examples. Start explaining to the dead people or now the paralyzed people and their families as to give me some bullet point details of what we've done. We've done some things, sure. Why do these particular things keep happening? Why do these things keep happening? And we have to figure it out. And so the part about the reason I chose that section first, because even the line of police brutality being something that we call this, I think lightens the load off of them. The numbers of people that get killed indiscriminately, not saying it's a genocide because the numbers aren't the same as somewhere else, but throughout history in this country, we know how Black folks just expect bad behavior from cops because we've all experienced it. It's just the way it goes. And if we know this and you're not listening to us, it continues to happen. It's a very simple transaction. We talk, you listen. And after you talk, we listen too. It never really goes down that way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I get frustrated when I hear arguments about how, oh, well, sure, spread your message or speak out against what you perceive to be wrong, but don't be angry, right? Protest, but protest in a specific way. But there's no winning. There's absolutely no winning. Colin Kaepernick does a peaceful protest where he literally just kneels during the national anthem, and he's absolutely antagonized, demonized, loses his entire NFL career as a result of that. And so they're going to refer people who have been gaslighting about the reality of this country are gonna go ahead and disagree with the message no matter what, regardless of what the presentation is, which is why I have no patience for anyone who wants to come at me or anyone today about how, protesters were surrounding Rand Paul and they made Rand Paul uncomfortable. Well, okay, let's ask ourselves, how did we get to this point? Because it was only a few months ago, Rand Paul gave an impassioned objection on the Senate floor against legislation that would criminalize lynching on a federal level. Okay, obviously people's voices haven't been heard. Things don't just go from calm to people surrounding a politician overnight. This kind of stuff has been going on for a long time and people haven't been heard. Jacob Blake's father also spoke today. Let's take a look at that.
There are two systems of justice in the United States. there's a white system and there's a black system. The black system ain't doing so well. But we're gonna stand up. Every black person in the United States is gonna stand up. We're tired. I'm tired of looking at cameras and seeing these young black and brown people suffer. We're gonna hold court on systematic racism. Guilty. Yeah. Guilty. Guilty.
So, yeah, and you know, we just watched the RNC happen, and both the DNC and RNC did this. So I'm not saying it's particular to the RNC, but we just did hear the RNC where people come out and speak about, you know, their daughter that was doing humanitarian work overseas in dangerous areas and then got abducted by terrorists and murdered, and how they wish something else would have been done structurally within the system of our government to help her sooner than it took, and it ended up in her death. I apologize for not knowing the family's name; it slips my mind. But so when you hear the constant and stream of families where victims were murdered by cops and tell you their story and talk about what they're going through and how this country continues to ignore their issues, why doesn't that ring to you as well? Why doesn't that stick with you? Because it sticks with a lot of people, but why doesn't it stick with the people that have these positions of power to do these things? It's strictly because they don't want to. They're ignoring it. They're overlooking it. So the all lives matter folks saying, oh, that's what we should be saying. Hey, we're looking at the rest of the lives that matter, that were lost. You are not looking at the lives that we're talking about. So when you hear an impassioned plea from a father like that about what we need, who needs to be on trial, which is the racism in this country, will you hear him? Here's another opportunity. There's another historic event. It's an anniversary year of this whole thing, 57 years on this. So are you gonna listen yet? Like, what's it gonna take? Why we and my approach is, why are we still talking to you? Because you've already proven to me that you have no interest in discussing this. I'm not sure what the next step would be if we're not going to have this conversation anymore, but we already know one side is not listening.
So with one side not listening, do you feel any optimism or hope for the future of race relations in America?
I always do, because so as we're talking about how many things haven't changed, there are more, I think, because obviously I wasn't around in the 1960s, but I think there are more people that are seeing exactly what it is that has been happening, how much people have ignored it. I've got plenty of friends that sure supported the fight against explicit police murder and brutality in the country directed to black folks, but they never were mobilized or felt the need and a fire in their belly to come out and do something. The way this summer has been full of these protests all across the country. And yes, sure, there were white folks and other ethnicities of folks in these protests in the 60s. And we're just living in what we're seeing now. I've seen progress in what the citizenry is willing to see and do and try to force the hand of the powers that be about it. So it's along those lines, which are always, that's always heartfelt, and I feel good about that. And it's a matter of convincing the folks that actually do something as far as legislation and those next steps to do something.
Absolutely. One more video from today, and this is George Floyd's brother speaking at the March on Washington.
I wish George were here to see this right now. That's who I'm marching for. I'm marching for George, for Brianna, for Ahmaud, for Jacob, for Pamela Turner, for Michael Brown, Trayvon, and anybody else who lost their lives or are too evil. As of now, everybody out here right now, our leaders, they need to follow us while we're marching to enact laws to protect us.
Man, it's hard, man. It's really hard. I'm so sorry, man.
The brother of a man that was murdered on camera from 4 different angles has to go in front of all these folks and tell a story yet again after you already told it on TV before, and then try to fight through the tears and the emotion to tell you how bad it is. And he still has to come up with a coherent thought that is, we're out here and we're not leaders. He mentioned how hot it was too. We're out here and we're not the leaders, but we need the leaders to start following us. It's such a simple concept. What are we there for? Because you know what a lot of these guys in the White House and many conservatives in general will say is, fine, you have the right to protest. What are they protesting for? What's the point of a protest? Just so you can disparage them and talk about how horrible they are? Or is it so that that can affect change? So when the NBA decides to not play for a couple days and then you get mad at them, what's the point of protesting? It's supposed to lead to change. Hey, George Floyd's brother and Jacob Blake's family can't walk into Congress and enact legislation and vote on it. They can't go to the Senate and force Mitch McConnell to finally bring up a vote. And we're going to get to Rand Paul, so I'm holding all my fire for him. But this is how this is supposed to work. When citizens come out and speak to you about their problems and what things need to change and give you reasons and proof behind it, dead bodies, then you're supposed to listen because you're supposed to serve us. Now, when other folks that you actually deem reasonable or worth it come out and talk about things that needs to be changed in this country, you listen to them because you think they're worth listening to. There's a hierarchy of which citizens are worth their points and their perspectives and ones that are. And we're seeing that drawn every day by our leadership. So yeah, you can say, oh yeah, we don't have anything against you protesting. We just have something against you looting and rioting. Well, I don't need you to be against me protesting. I need you to listen to me protesting and then do something about it.
Right. Because the emphasis on the looting and rioting is specifically meant to deflect from the core of the message, of the demonstrators. And I think that's very intentional by the very people who have no interest in listening to that message or doing what's right. And I'm specifically talking about politicians, what's right to represent people. I mean, they're supposed to be public servants. Mm-hmm. And let me just say, after losing someone close to me this year who wasn't even a family member and feeling that pain, and this was, he had an illness we didn't know about and he died suddenly. If someone in my family was murdered and it was on camera and it was a case of police murder that was justified over and over again, how do you not get angry? How do you not want revenge? That is a very human emotion. And it's just constant insult to injury. It's the lack of justice. It's the constant replay of that footage that's traumatizing for most people who have a soul, a heart, anything, right? And then on top of it, it's the nonstop gaslighting and commentary about how the victim deserved it. How do you not get angry? How do you tell people, don't be upset, demonstrate calmly? I'm just telling you right now, I wouldn't be able to do it. And I just give everyone who participated in the March on Washington today a ton of credit, because it takes a lot of strength to go up there and talk about something as traumatizing and as heartbreaking as watching a family member get shot in the back several times or watching a family member get slaughtered in broad daylight, and know that there's unlikely to be any justice in those cases.
Yeah, it's hard to talk to friends and family about someone you've lost, let alone talking to people who don't care and actually are aggressively against your story, because that's happening consistently. We already know that. And there's enough people in this country. We know there's wild people online and stuff. But so the fact you have to come out knowing you're facing opposition for your story, for nothing you did, Jacob Blake's family wasn't looking for this to happen one day and be like, this would be fun to go out on this media tour and talk about how he got shot 7, 8 times in his back. That's great. So this summer's kind of boring. Let's have this happen. What makes you think that they want to be there? No, we're avoiding people of their emotions. It's part of a racist approach to someone. If you see someone up there crying, or if we've seen how many times this happened. I mentioned with the NBA guys a couple of days ago, that they're boycotting, which is wrong. They're protesting. They're doing all this stuff, and they're not collecting their checks. Or what about helping the millions of dollars that they're making? What about there are some human beings who are tired of seeing us and maybe they can't focus on basketball right now? We're separating them from human emotion. And that's what happened in slavery days. You separate them from humans. We call them animals. So that you can murder them at any point and be like, yeah, it was just another cattle on my ranch. I needed to put that one down. That's how it's always been here. And we still haven't really fully come out of it. So when you see George Floyd's brother, they're crying and apologizing for crying. Who apologizes for crying over a brother's death? For that we don't feel any kind of connection to him because we've separated emotion from certain people already.
We got to take a break. When we come back, we have more for you guys, including Scott Walker, former governor of Wisconsin, not able to handle the heat during a simple CNN interview with Anderson Cooper. We'll be right back.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. Anna and Jayar with you. I wanted to take a quick look at our thermometer for the month of August. As you guys know, Monday is the last day of the month, and our goal is to raise $200,000 for this month. Let's see how much progress or lack of progress we've made. And look, part of it is my fault because I'm really bad at promoting anything, including my own work, which gets people upset time to time. But it's okay. Let's take a look at the thermometer. Okay, 118,763. We are, I'm going to be optimistic and say hanging in there. We still have a few more days. Please go to tyt.com/go to contribute. Hopefully we meet our goal for the month of August. Amy from our members section says that I need to show the Twitch viewers some love, that I might not get Twitch, but Twitch gets me. So I'm gonna go ahead and read everything from the Twitch section. CatMom2300 resubbed for the second month with Prime, so thank you. Individualism killed the cat, donated 200 bits. Puppy love, oh Charlie. Obi Mom Kenobi gifted her 484th sub to the channel, which is bananas. Ireman42 donated 600 bits, and Chillbat gifted 5 subs to the channel. So thank you so much to our Twitch audience. For those of you who haven't checked us out on Twitch yet, you can by going to twitch.tv/TYT, twitch.tv/TYT. All right, let's get to the rest of the news, including right-wingers who like to consider themselves alpha males, but run away from interviews when they're asked tough questions, like Scott Walker. Former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker was called out on his own hypocrisy involving police brutality. This happened during an interview on Anderson Cooper's show, and something pretty interesting happened. Take a look.
To the sheriff I reached out to, the mayor didn't want support, the sheriff did, and we took action.
Right. I just think at a time like this, only pointing out what you say are Democratic failures, which I understand wanting Joe Biden to say something that he hasn't said, but not actually pointing out silence. You said silence is complicity on Democrats' part. The president has not even addressed the shooting of Mr. Blake. Now, I understand there's an ongoing investigation, and it's very important that investigation, because for all we know, some circumstances may arise that would more fully inform everybody's opinion about what happened, because we would know, what preceded this, or what was in the officers' minds, or did this person have a gun? Did this person have a weapon? Which seems the police say, looks like we lost your signal. Well, we apologize for the signal loss, but we appreciate Governor Walker's time. Sorry, live television.
So JR, I don't know. We might be unfair to him. Maybe he was trying to fix his camera angle and accidentally turned the camera off. I don't know. Maybe we should give him the benefit of the doubt. What do you think?
I'm not sure in which scenario. First of all, I was just amazed that those bars came up like that right there, those rainbow bars. I was like, that happens? Next, we're going to see the static, those old school TVs. Like, I was like, what is that? Like, this is concluded. Tonight's, like, remember 1 a.m. in the morning or something back in the day, because I'm that old, when TV would go off. It'd be late enough that, like, we ended our broadcast day. And it was like, and you wake up in the middle of the night like, oh, I fell asleep in front of the TV. I'm seeing static. Like, that doesn't happen anymore. I'm more amazed that those bars came up, because I have no idea how once you turn something off, or even if you accidentally disconnect something, that rainbow bars pop up. I'm impressed, Scott.
Apparently they do. I love how that's your takeaway from this. And you know what? I don't blame you, because Scott Walker is going to Scott Walker, right? So I don't know if he intentionally turned off the camera because he can't handle the heat. But Anderson Cooper, to his credit, was making a pretty good point, right? So this whole thing about silence is you being complicit. That's what they accuse Democrats of. Well, I mean, we're seeing a lot of complicit behavior by Republican lawmakers who either, first of all, the worst kind, try to make excuses for the slaughter of Black people by police officers throughout the country. And then there are those who just sit by quietly and don't address the issue at all. Now, Walker has addressed the issue in the past. I want to fast forward to some of these graphics and also note that former Governor Walker, was very much in favor of what the McCloskeys did in pointing their guns at protesters as they marched past their home. Right, so he's in favor of certain individuals practicing their Second Amendment rights, but when it comes to other people, well, he would use the exact same action to justify a police shooting. So let me give you the details. So here's a previous statement from Walker. This isn't the America I grew in. We've seen racial tensions worsen and a tendency to use law enforcement as scapegoat. This kind of attitude has created a culture in which we all too often see demonstrations and chants where people describe police as pigs and call for them to be fried like bacon. Okay, so I want to actually address the chants, because that's a common thing that right wingers like to. I don't care. First of all, it happened during one protest, and they love to like latch onto that as justification for murder. Right? For these types of people, for people to get murdered, that's what they latch onto. What happened to like words don't matter, right? What happened to, oh, well, you should need a safe space from words you don't like to hear. Who cares what they're chanting? What matters is who's getting harmed physically, who's losing their lives, who's getting killed. And we've seen multiple examples, endless examples of where the issue really is.
Yeah, I mean, you got the guns, you got the law behind you, you got politicians behind, on both sides of the aisle, by the way, behind you and everything that you do. So what are you worried about what someone says and what name they call you? They actually don't. They use it as an excuse to continue their actions, to keep it real. Because if anybody really wants to read how in-depth this is, the Plain View Project, plainviewproject.org, go to it. You can scroll through countless Facebook posts, social media posts that were done by police officers. Police officers also responding to social media posts saying some extremely disgusting things that had nothing to do with frying or pigs, but what they call citizens and what they say they want to do to them and how they laugh about it. Well, I feel like pigs and frying is the least offensive thing you can think of compared to some of the things they say before they go back to work and carry out those actions. So that's the part of it. I mean, I also wouldn't care if they decide to just talk trash about people every once in a while. But then after you talk trash about them, you go out and you make it happen. You fulfill those promises of what you want to do to citizens, and you do them, and then walk back away and say, I'm just gonna go back to work because I know my department has my back. So there's empty names and slogans because someone's mad about what you've done to them. And then there's the people who are carrying it out and saying far worse things and then doing it some more. Which one are you going to be offended by? Really?
Right. I'm going to give you a few more statements and then debunk some of what Scott Walker says, not because Scott Walker matters, but because this is the type of rhetoric that gets parroted by others who justify police murder. He says police officers across the country need to know that we have their back. As I've done throughout my career, I will continue to have the backs of police officers, sheriff's deputies, and state troopers and treat them with the respect they deserve. No law enforcement officer should fear to do their job the way he or she was trained to do it, and no law-abiding citizen should fear for their safety from those sworn to protect us. But I want to be clear that the America that Scott grew up in, right, was actually much more dangerous for police than it is now. Because the way that they frame this in their efforts to defend police is, oh my God, I mean, it's a dangerous world, dangerous country. Their lives are always being risked while they do these jobs. But when you look at the numbers, you see that this country is actually a lot safer for police officers today as opposed to decades ago. Historical data, for instance, show that the job of an officer is still safer today than it was 30 years ago. Following a spike in officer deaths during the infancy of the war on drugs, police deaths have been declining for the past 3 decades. According to statistics reported to the FBI, 89 law enforcement officers were killed in line of duty incidents in 2019. Of these, 48 officers died as a result of felonious acts. Now, law-abiding citizens, however, continue to be shot down year after year at rates unlike any other wealthy country. In fact, let's take a look at this graph from the Prison Policy Initiative, which shows you what the United States looks like in regard to the total number of people killed by law enforcement in the most recent year the data was available, compared to all these other countries. You see Canada, Australia, Germany, the Netherlands, England and Wales, Japan, New Zealand, Iceland, Norway. I mean, come on, the United States is off the charts.
Yeah, so when you look at charts like this is one of those instances where you get it, where I wish someone had a chance to confront someone who decides to say that policing is doing just fine. One of Scott Walker's quotes was that like they shouldn't be afraid to do their job that they've been trained to do. Well, this is what their training has resulted in comparison to other countries. There's only 2 conclusions you can come up with. Police are overzealous with killing people, or Americans are just really bad people. And specifically, the number of Americans you kill, and certain Americans that you kill, means they're particularly even worse people than the other bad Americans that we got, because we got to kill them on the streets. They're all bad, right? Or there's circumstances that create those situations, or there's overzealous cops. So you got to choose. Are cops overzealous or Americans bad? Because both of those things sound bad for a politician to say. Americans don't want to hear you say, yo, Americans, you guys suck. It's not going to work. And also you can't go against your police. So this is when like facts and figures need to be confronted to have people really give the answer. Because you just throw out names and support for people, but never actually talk about why you support them.
When we come back from the break, we'll talk about protesters who specifically targeted protests toward people leaving the RNC last night. Rand Paul is shook, and so are conservatives. But we're going to give you some details about where the real terrorism lies in this country. We'll be right back.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. We're running very short on time, and it's important that we get to some of these stories. So I'm just going to read one member comment from Spicy Flanders, who has a message of hope. We create our own hope when we realize our own power. We don't need these corrupt politicians and cops. They need us to doubt our own power. #JusticeNow. And you're absolutely right. I think if we realize our own power and we organize, we can get some actual change in this country. Become a member. Go to tyt.com/join, where on today's post game we're going to cover a lot of stories, including possibly Chris Wallace. What does he have to say about Donald Trump's RNC speech? He's never afraid to speak out against him. So we'll have that video and more. And since I promised, we did hit about 1,200 likes on this stream. I got to be honest with you guys, I'm not in a singing mood. So I'm going to do a poetic presentation of Debbie Deb's Lookout Weekend. Jumping music, slick DJs, fog machines and laser rays. Lookout weekends, cause here I come. Because weekends were made for fun. Lookout weekend, cause here I come. Because weekends were made for fun, fun, fun. I work hard every day. It's all work and no play. With the boss on my back, he don't give me any slack. I sit down, I daydream of how my weekend's gonna be. We move on to the news.
This should be
for liking the stream. I know, right? All right, let's talk about Rand Paul. Protesters greeted RNC patrons as they left the event, and right-wing radicals are upset about it because apparently they're not in favor of any form of protest, whether it's peaceful protests like Colin Kaepernick kneeling, or protests that actually confront people in positions of power who are supposed to represent their own constituents. Rand Paul is no exception, and so here's what the scene looked like last night. Now, I want to emphasize that no one laid a finger on Rand Paul. We all saw the video. There was one moment where the cop next to Rand Paul pushed one of the protesters. The protester pushed back and the cop lost his balance. But other than that, the situation might have felt a little scary for Rand Paul, but no one assaulted him and no one physically attacked him, despite what the radical right would have you believe in this country. So Paul talked about this later during an interview on Fox and Friends. Let's hear what he had to say.
Senator, good morning. That looks scary. Yeah, my wife and I, it was horrific. As we walked one block, we could see some police in the distance, but we also saw a mob of about 30 people marching and yelling. They all of a sudden saw me right as we got to the policeman, fortunately, or I don't think we'd have survived. And as they came closer, they were shouting my name, and the crowd doubled to 60. And then it doubled again to 120. The crowd was getting bigger and bigger and pushing in. They were yelling threats. They were trying to push the police over to get to me. They were grabbing at us. And it got worse and worse and worse. And they were shouting threats, to us, to kill us, to hurt us. But they're also shouting, say her name, Breonna Taylor. And it's like, you couldn't reason with this mob, but I'm actually the author of the Breonna Taylor law to end no-knock raids. So the irony is lost on these idiots that they're trying to kill the person who's actually trying to get rid of no-knock raids.
That's interesting. I didn't see anyone trying to kill Rand Paul. I saw a group of people who are frustrated with the lack of change in this country, with the rhetoric that we're getting specifically from conservatives like Rand Paul, who tried to justify his blocking of an anti-lynching legislation. He blocked that from becoming law. And he's right. He did author the no-knock warrant legislation, but he's also a senator from the state of Kentucky, where the 3 cops who murdered Breonna Taylor are still out on the loose. They have not been charged, and there has been no justice in that story, in that case, even given the fact that there's evidence showing that these cops lied to a judge in order to obtain a no-knock warrant and intrude on Breonna Taylor's home. And so he's got power. Rand Paul has power. Why isn't he making a big deal about the fact that Breonna Taylor was gunned down and there's absolutely no justice in that case? And why was he so vocal against a bipartisan piece of legislation, bipartisan, Republicans wanted this too, that would make lynching a federal crime? That happened just a few months ago. And look, I actually would prefer, JR, that we were in a situation where people didn't feel the need to confront politicians this way. But we need to ask, why has it gotten to this point? Because this didn't happen overnight.
No, and so when you get yourself out in the street and decide to go and walk through people and then they start yelling at you, sure, it could have been intimidating. You might want to avoid it, number one. So first do that. But the story he was telling as he's going through, it sounded like the way you tell a story to your 5-year-old kid before bed. It's like they kept getting larger and larger and bigger still, and even more, and then scarier and then scarier, and then it got closer and closer. Like, bro, we don't need to be coddled into your fear mongering. Number one. Number two, how do you know? I'm just gonna start. I'm sorry to poke holes in this guy's story. You saw 30 people from a block away. There were protesters. You saw a couple of cops and you walked towards them. Then it grew to 60. Then it doubled to 120. How do you know how many numbers of people there were that quickly and easily? I thought you were fearing for your life. There's also in this story, because he told her for 10 minutes. Also in the story, he said, I don't think they were gonna kill us. And then a few minutes later, he goes, they were gonna kill us. Which one is it, Rand? So it's just, I'm just getting into his mindset of how he really wasn't concerned. But even if he was, ask yourself, why are people so upset? Just because they're thugs and violent protesters out to come and kill you and your wife and your 2 friends that you were walking there along with. And so when the Breonna Taylor, these idiots, as he called them, Breonna Taylor asking, say her name, I'm the author of the bill. Where's the bill? Has it been passed yet? Is it still a bill? Are you a senator? Have you been advocating for this bill to get put up for a vote? Have you been calling on Mitch McConnell for blocking any kind of legislation that will do anything about no-knock warrants? Number one. Number two, this is willful ignorance about what the anger is over Breonna Taylor from the no-knock warrants. She's dead, and the people that killed her are still walking around sipping tea and celebrating. What have you done about that, Rand Paul? You've done nothing about that. You haven't even mentioned it, and you don't even know how to pronounce her name. So for this bill that you've offered up that's done nothing, why aren't you pushing for your bill? Because when you have tax cut bills and all these bills to help out President Trump, you're definitely advocating for those. It sounds like you don't give a damn about this bill that you authored, and you just use it every once in a while to deflect from people talking about your lack of action.
Bingo, 100%, bingo. And I'm not interested in having a discussion about how there's left-wing terrorism in this country, because Rand Paul and his wife decided to walk into a crowd of protesters who didn't lay a finger on him. I am interested in talking about radical right-wing terrorism in this country, which actually is a big problem, not based on what I believe, but based on data that's been published by the FBI. So I'll get to those details in just a second. But since the right wing loves to harp on anecdotal evidence, I'll go ahead and hit you with some anecdotal evidence. What about the armed protesters that showed up to the Michigan State Capitol because they were so upset about having to wear masks and having to stay home in the middle of a pandemic that has already killed nearly 180,000 Americans in this country? Do you want to remember what that scene looked like? I remember, but I can refresh your memory.
You policemen are all cowards. You betrayed us. The police have betrayed the people. You work for socialist radicals. You enjoy the people's rights being taken from them.
Thought you were getting respectable positions and realized nobody respects you. Nobody respects anything you guys do. You guys are not first responders.
Is this what you want?
Yeah, that's right. They're armed. They're screaming Heil Hitler. They're also, some of them were able to get into the actual room where people were, state legislators were trying to decide whether they were going to reopen businesses, and they were screaming at them with their guns, completely, across their shoulders. Oh, Heil to Whitmer. Okay, my bad. Yeah. I thought he said Heil Hitler. My bad. Okay, so Heil to Whitmer. But anyway, and there were state lawmakers who were terrified because you have armed people in the room threatening you, screaming at you as you're trying to make important decisions about what the state should do in the middle of a pandemic. But that was okay. That was just good law-abiding citizens practicing their First Amendment rights. Like, we can totally whitewash what happened during that day. And then, of course, the Bundy standoff that happened in 2014. That was when you had armed right-wingers engaging in a standoff with police officials in 2014. That was okay. And again, far right-wing terrorism has significantly outpaced terrorism from other types of perpetrators, including from far left networks and individuals inspired by the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Right-wing attacks and plots account for the majority of all terrorist incidents in the United States since 1994. And the total number of right-wing attacks and plots has grown significantly during the past 6 years. Right-wing extremists perpetrated 2/3 of the attacks and plots in the United States in 2019, and over 90% between January 1st and May 8th of 2020.
More stats that we need to hear from people whenever you're confronted with people talking about how violent the left is. Hey, there's actual stats to talk about how bad this has gotten and that your president has done nothing about it, and it's grown since. There's a direct cause and effect to what's going on.
Well, the post game is next. We'll talk about Trump's RNC speech and some conservatives who spoke out against it. Come right back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.